We are back with you today for episode 2 of our CyberSift Cybersecurity webinar series. I am here with David to discuss a very important topic today related to cybersecurity, that of regulation.
Hello, everyone. Pleased to be here again.
So, David, what are the major challenges today faced by clients in regulated industries when it comes to cybersecurity? What do they need to do? What do they need to report? What are the challenges facing them in terms of what they need to have in place, the investment they need to make in cybersecurity?
Right. It's a very interesting topic for regulated industries because it's becomes from a nice to have to a mandatory requirement. It's no longer an insurance like we were talking about last time. All of a sudden, a regulated industry now is facing something which you must have in order to operate. It will become kind of like a license. You don't have the necessary requirements, you're not even allowed to operate. So for these industries, and they tend to be mostly financial, health, or government style outfits, we're raising the bar from insurance to license kind of thing. So it is an extreme. It's the cost is all that much more justified, the cost and the effort, but there is obviously a much higher return because your business to a certain degree depends on it much more so than anywhere else. The fine line over here is twofold. Number one, these regulated industries, probably apart from the banks, tend to be a bit cash strapped, which means one of the challenges are how much do I need to do to get this regulation without going overboard and wasting money. Number two is, and I think it's a challenge that most organizations fail, is you don't want to fall into a trap of a regulation or a certification, whatever it is, legislation, just becoming a tick in the box exercise. Because anyway, the legislation aspect of it might be addressed, but the security aspect of it isn't. And you fall back to what we were discussing in the previous episode, where not even your insurance is working. So there has to be a fine line and a balancing act between cost and actually doing the things.
Yes. So we hear people talking about the frameworks of regulation like DORA and ISO. I mean, there are some companies who are like Go, ISO certified, without perhaps having the necessary requirements for it. But at the same time, we pride ourselves in being ISO certified, and we actually flaunt it as well with clients, and clients appreciate it. What I see today as well happening in with a lot of our large corporate clients is that they seem to be having situations where they need to actually ask us to tell them how secure our networks are, how safe their information within our networks are, because they are heavily regulated themselves. And this information requirement normally comes from the banks mainly. Could you please explain technically what these standards and these regulatory frameworks mean to the clients?
Sure. So let's start off by first of all, I am sure that Go have all the requirements for ISO, as do us. We are also ISO certified, and like you're saying, we flaunt it to a degree, but there's a good reason, and that's what I'm going to explain right now. So we have, in general, two kinds of regulatory frameworks. The ISO 27001, which you just mentioned, is non-prescriptive. In other words, the framework guides you, but doesn't tell you that you must have a certain feature or a certain process in place. So it's not exactly like a recipe. It's more like, you know, you go and you say, according to best practices, I have X, Y, and Z. It does guide you in what those X, Y, and Z is, but then you might say, listen, such requirement doesn't quite apply to me. And if you give valid reason, good enough reason, an auditor will either agree with you or disagree with you and issue the legislation. But what does that mean? That means that any company, so whether it's a big one like Go or a small one like CyberSift, can achieve this certification and show to prospective customers that, listen, they follow best practices when it comes to security. And ISO itself is a very wide-ranging certification. And as we spoke about in the last episode, even though it's security focused, it ends up branching into different parts of your organization, like HR, onboarding, finances, who checks for fraud, IT operations, who is monitoring your servers, and then there is all the security aspects of it. But it manages to fit large and small companies alike, and it is a very good thing to get, because again, you show people, validated by an independent third party, so don't take my word for it, in other words, that you are following best practices. So there is that, and we'll come to why bigger companies like banks ask for it.
In fact, David, if I may,
Mm-hmm.
we are really finding now a situation. I mean, I am proud that we are actually certified by an international company. These are international standards. I mean,
Right.
considering the client base that Go has and the requirements that we face, we've now reached a point where, first of all, I'm very proud that we have reached this level of security. But sometimes in request for quotations or in tenders, and there's actually one of the specifications actually requires us to specify that we are
ISO certified.
ISO certified, and that we also have to say what level of security we have in our company. Don't forget, we are dealing with a lot of information here in terms of the telecoms information that we have passing through our networks.
Of course.
And so it's sometimes a prerequisite. So if you are not certified, then
you're out of the running.
You can't even send your own proposal. So this is the level of importance these standards and the regulation now has even on us as suppliers.
Let's delve into that exact last point, because it ties in nicely with DORA. So DORA, Digital Operations and Resiliency Act, is a prescriptive framework. So here you have lawyers, the EU, of course, telling you you must have these kind of features, procedures, security measures in place. Must. And they are enforced by local governments. In our case, MITA. Which is why you're seeing MITA step up the efforts in this space. So what does DORA specifically say? DORA goes again to what are termed critical service providers, banks, like you just mentioned, ghost customers, healthcare, a raft of others, but they still end up being big players. And it tells them, listen, you must have penetration testing, you must have log monitoring, you must have so on and so forth. But notably, and this is where it's a bit different from other things that we are a bit used to. Initially, when this was being drafted up, we thought it's yet another legislation for the big players. It doesn't quite affect us. Maybe Go was also thinking along those lines. I know we were. But what happened? DORA, all of a sudden, under its scope, got the same prescriptive measures and said, any third-party suppliers to these critical companies, organizations, also fall under our scope. That made a big difference, because now all of a sudden you can be a small company, think a 5-person team, who is contracted to perform data analysis for a bank. And because they have this relationship with a critical organization like a bank, now they face these prescriptive measures that come from DORA. And now here you're starting to see the interplay between customers, bigger customers that you are talking about, and entities like GO or ourselves, CyberSift. So both our organizations deal with critical companies like banks and so on. So we would be impacted by this scope of DORA, which means the bank has to, no doubt about it, has to vet its suppliers. Go, CyberSift, insert any lawyer firm, data analysis shop, whatever it is. They have to be vetted correctly. But considering the amount of suppliers and third-party contractors a bank has, I think it would take more than a department for them to manually go and say, great, Go passes all the testing for DORA, CyberSift doesn't, so we can't do business with them, and so on and so forth. So what they instead do is they fall back to a proxy certification like ISO, because ISO all of a sudden says, listen, an auditor, an international independent auditor, is vouching that CyberSift, that Go, that lawyer ABC follows these best practices, which obviously align with the DORA ones. They're not completely covered, but a lot of it aligns. So when you start seeing in these tenders or in your dealings with customers, the first question is, do you have ISO 27001, or we can't deal with you? There is this interplay between the regulations where they are essentially trying to make sure that they are not going to be lumped with a whole lot of due diligence on a third-party provider who never showed any evidence of security best practices.
So in terms of the service that CyberSift offers now, with regard to regulation, if I am a company in the financial services sector, and I know that I am to follow certain practices, what kind of service in terms of cybersecurity protection, reporting? Because obviously, these companies have to, first of all, most of them, all of them are audited. So the auditors would be looking into what practices they're following, what level of security they have, and so on and so forth. Would it be a matter of this company having a person who's responsible for making sure that they're in line with all the regulation, another person to deal with security, or is it something that CyberSift can do through the services it provides in its entirety?
No, so I would say that you need a bit of hand-holding for both terms, because at the very least you need a four eyes principle. The provider cannot audit themselves, so most of the time the customer would need what you were saying last episode, a security champion, even if they are a legal kind of person, just to make sure that the services that CyberSift is providing is actually helping them tick the box. And for example, but when it comes to actually ticking those boxes, or making sure they are not just ticks, but you are actually doing the security hygiene behind them, that is where CyberSift security portfolio helps you. So for example, DORA split roughly into four: risk management and governance, incident response, resilience testing, and what we just mentioned, third-party risk management. So let's not talk about third-party risk management. Let's talk about the first three. You have ICT risk management, which basically means you need to know what is running in your system. You need to know what kind of risks affect those systems running in your infrastructure. So over there, we have products like Tutela, and to a certain extent the SIEM, where we scan your network, what is running, what kind of versions of software do you have. What libraries are your developers using? What threats and vulnerabilities apply to those pieces of software? So over there, we're already helping you. The SIEM does this to quite an extent as well, because we are double checking ourselves in terms of risk management. You're also talking about auditing who did what. The SIEM shines over there. But then the second part is what we were talking about, which is the digital operations resilience testing. And that is where we have penetration testing that comes in. You would like to know beforehand where your operations are maybe not so resilient. For those of you who read the book Anti-Fragile, penetration testing makes sure your company is anti-fragile. And this is exactly what operational resilience means. So penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, which is what Tutela does as well. These are all things that CyberSift does. However, you need someone in your company, yes, to point out that, listen, okay, CyberSift is doing this, or CyberSift is not doing this. So let's find someone else who can help us. So you do need someone who makes a project manager, someone, a lawyer who can make sure that all your DORA requirements or ISO requirements are going green, certainly with advice from us, but not just from us.
But so there are still considerable savings to be made, though, not only in terms of risk, but in terms of HR, because people like you are very difficult to find today, because there's a large demand and you're very specialized in what you do. So, I mean, it would be very difficult for these individual companies to have a team like you have. So, yeah, you're doing monitoring. You have people doing it, so it's not just the machines that are doing it, and that's the most interesting part. I must admit that this relationship we have with you now started with us being your customers and us being, such satisfied customers of yours. So we actually started being customers and not partners. But the level of service that you give is obviously phenomenal. And it takes away not only the risk, but the headaches of finding the right people, because you'd have a person, like you're saying, in the company. Go has a small team, but we wouldn't be able to have what you currently have. We can't be good at,
That's right.
At everything, We're very good at what we do in terms of providing communication services, but the security part we leave to you mainly, although we have our small team, monitoring.
And it's a question of economies of scale as well. You guys have an excellent security team. In fact, you probably shoulder more than the rest of our customers, but there's also an argument to be made, what we were talking about before. If you are a 5-person data analytics team and you're suddenly under this lens of DORA, are you really going to add a 6th person who is going to an expensive, like you just mentioned, hard to find 6th person who's going to focus on just DORA? With Go and your vast infrastructure, etc., the answer would be yes, though we still want an escalation path, someone to advise us. For the smaller companies, lawyers, etc., that question becomes a resounding no. 1/6 of your paycheck, if not more, of your payroll is not going to be very well spent on someone just on DORA. So that is, and then where CyberSift's human element and analysts really shine.
Okay, so we spoke about the current situation, what we're seeing, our clients asking us to fill in forms regarding our security checks and the level of security that we have in the company before we even place a bid for the business HR. Another concern I have come across, especially when we are promoting CyberSift, is that the owner of the company many times asks us what level of reporting we can provide, because his board directors have asked that once a month when they meet, they want to discuss security and the protection the company is seeking. How can we help in that regard?
Yeah, so that is actually a very good question. There is the requirement is there at all levels, even from a technical perspective. A CTO would just want to keep a pulse on his infrastructure. The board of directors want to make sure that people are doing their job in terms of these requirements. Now, with CyberSift, what we do, I think I wouldn't say it's completely unique, but we don't come across it often with other security vendors. Is that we do, since we have these people, they are managed SOC, we do generate reports, and these reports, though initially they come out of a cookie cutter, they're all the same. We learn through back and forths with our customer, like this is important for you or this is not so important for you, and you end up getting a report which satisfies that particular customer's domain. To give a very good example, what applies to an iGaming company does not apply to a hospital. They have very different perspectives of what constitutes a risk. So the reports for them, first of all, would be completely different. But even if they had the same data, they would be presented in different ways because the board of directors for each is interested in different aspects. And that is where our products and then really help, because we manage to gather data from so many different sources. We're not siloed into any particular aspect of the infrastructure, that we can build a pretty comprehensive report of what's going on. Then the question becomes, how much do you want to report? Security is a bit like Alice in Wonderland going down the rabbit hole. How deep do you want to go? You can spend as much time as you want. So there is an element over there where we advise and we have to work with the customer so that these reports are good enough in terms of detail, but not overly technical or overly detailed that security gets lost in too many useless nitty-gritty issues. You don't want to throw the baby out of the bathwater, basically. You want to keep it nice and focused.
Okay. So regulation is here to stay. I mean, obviously, we need to make sure that we are in line with what not only just us, but obviously our customers, our suppliers have to make sure that we are very secure in terms of potential cyber attacks that the company might be facing. We are doing our utmost to make sure that our clients are well versed in terms of what level of security they require and how we can fit into the service that we can provide. I believe that any company, from what you're saying, any company, big to small, has to have a certain level of security. Perhaps the larger companies are more regulated. They have to ensure that they are in line with whatever that regulation requires. But cybersecurity attacks, cyber attacks can happen to anyone in business, so to speak. And not only, it can happen to individuals at home and then have a ripple effect on the rest of us.
That's right.
In our next episode, we shall be having a guest joining us. He is one of the key persons within the GO group who handles cybersecurity for GO, especially. And we shall be discussing penetration testing.
That's right. So, penetration testing is definitely one of the core tenets of DORA, plus one of the first things most customers ask us for as well, in terms of evaluating their security stance.
So we'll be having a live demo of the damage that a relatively unskilled hacker can do with limited resources. That would be very interesting. So thank you, David. For the next episode, we look forward to having Hubert with us. Until then, thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much.